So this is my 29-gallon tropical community tank that I'm going to be working on over the next couple weeks. Right now it just has a Tetra hang-on back filter. Then I have my do-it-yourself CO2 stuff, some T5 lighting. One of the reasons I'm rebuilding this cabinet is, I don't know if you can see it, so you can see all the cables in my CO2 reactor and stuff right now. So with rebuilding this, I'm actually going to be installing a 15-gallon sump tank in the bottom and doing all my filtration through that. So first we're going to go ahead and make the stand. I've already gone ahead and cut up my 2x4s. Used 4 2x4x8s to get all the pieces I needed. I don't really have a plan drawn up, but here in a second you'll see the finished product. Alright, so I have the main part of the stand assembled now. This isn't really the ideal design that I wanted to go with, but because of the size of my sump tank, I needed to make sure I could maximize space down in this bottom area. I'm going to be drilling holes in the tank, which means the piping is going to come up and do a elbow vertically. So I needed to keep these legs as far out to the sides as I could. The ideal situation, these legs would be up, rotated 90 degrees, and then on the inside of this screwing into the front board and then the side board. But I have this extra brace in here that is hopefully going to be able to keep this from swaying and make sure that the top portion is connected securely to the legs. I don't see any problems yet, but this should be alright. So the cabinet's fully put together now, and we've gone ahead and put the first coat of paint on here. Just to walk you through, here's where the tank is going to be sitting on the inside, and this will leave me a 2.5-inch gap. All the plumbing will be able to go vertically down to the sump tank. The sump will be sitting down here underneath this bottom shelf, and then all my CO2 equipment will be sitting on this top shelf. All the lines will be feeding from the left side of the sump and then back up behind. So I have all my PVC fittings laid out just to make sure I had the right counts for everything. All of this is going to be connecting this tank to the 29-gallon display tank up top. Just a quick overview. Starting up here is going to be my main overflow siphon, which will feed itself down into a bulkhead in the side of the tank when I drill the holes. The Rio 1400 Aqua Plus water pump will be feeding the return line, which will work its way up through here. And then this piece is going to be an emergency overflow siphon, so if the main siphon gets clogged or anything like that and the water level starts getting too high, it will drain everything down into the sump above a certain point. And hopefully the water pump will be able to keep up. Now that the tank is drying, it's time to start cutting PVC and working on the internal plumbing. So now I just finished drilling my holes out in the sump tank for the return and the siphon feed. This is where I'm going to install the bulkhead for the main return. This is our return line from the water pump to control the actual amount of water that goes up into the main tank. And in the center is my main siphon drain inlet, and here's the emergency overflow. So this is where we're going to install all the filter media coming over the first baffle, under the second, over the third into the main chamber, and then over the fourth and under the fifth back into the return pump. Alright, so I had a little mishap when I was drilling the 15-gallon tank, the original tank I was going to use for the sump. You can probably see it pretty clear right here. Everything drilled just fine, but while I was tightening in the bulkheads, it just split right up the side, and I'm not comfortable using that in any sort of sump system I have, just in case. I know the one time I'm out of town it's going to flood, or a crack and flood. So I had to go out, and I was trying to find a 15-gallon replacement, but I was unable to do so in a very cost-effective manner, so I was able to find this 20-gallon relatively cheap. It still sucks I had to go out and buy another tank for it, but a couple benefits I'm going to have from this is now I have a few extra gallons worth of capacity to add for cycling water. It'll be a little bit more that you know, the power goes out and I have to drain everything in the tubes down into this, it'll hold a little bit more. So see, I use the same measurements on this because the 12 or the 20 and the 15 are the same measurements going back, 24 inches wide by 12 inches deep. The only difference is the 15 is 12 inches high and the 20 is a little over 16 inches high. So here's all the bulkheads. Starting out with the main one, this is where, once I get the water pump in here and trim the flex tubing down, that's going to connect into here, and that'll run up to the return feed. Here's the return feed, or the return feed control, and my two siphon drains. So I had to trim the bulkheads down as well and use them kind of backwards, so the smooth side is facing out, and that's just in the entrance of space. To seal these off, I did not tighten them as tight as I did with the 15 gallon, just in fear of cracking this one as well. So I put a small bead of silicone in and around it. I didn't want to do that because I still wanted to be able to take these off, and you know, if I needed to change something or fix something. But at this point, I think it's just going to be safest to make sure they're 100% sealed up and glued in. So yeah, that's what it's looking like now. My next stop is to have all these baffles put in, and then we'll have to make adjustments to the cabinet to fit the larger tank. Alright, all the baffles are now glued in place. I'm hoping that the heights of these work out alright. This first one is a 14-inch baffle where the water will come up through the filter media. The second one is a second 14-inch baffle where it comes down underneath, and then here we have a 10-inch one, which will match the one on this side. I'm just hoping that this one is not too short, so if water were to come back over or be piled up in here, then it wouldn't necessarily go through all of the extra equipment that'll be here in the center console. This side's got a little messy with the aquarium sealant. I had to stack little plexiglass dividers up here because this is where this plastic egg crate is going to be resting across each one of these layers, providing a different layer of filtration. This is what I'll be using as my mechanical filtration on this first level, so when water comes in, it'll pass through this foam before it moves up to the activated carbon and then the ceramic media. Alright, at this point I have my overflow drain, my secondary overflow drain is all put together. I'm ready to go out. This one differs from the first one a little bit, since it's going to be, this will be sticking above the water level by about 3/4 of an inch. So if the first siphon were to get clogged, the water level would rise and then drain out into this one the same way the other one did. I've also got the 20 gallon in here. All the baffles are pretty cured, but I'm going to give it another day before I actually do testing. I got the water pump bolted in there, coming up, everything strapped in, the return line coming back down, and then here's my two drain feeds coming in from the top. At this point, I'm going to be testing with these rubber buckets, so that's the return, and that's going to be one siphon. I really only have room to do one at a time, so I won't be able to test both drains in tandem until I get them in the actual tank, unfortunately. Alright, so we finally got our first test going. So I have the water level, you know, pretty appropriate for where it would be in the side of the tank. I don't know if you can see it, but so here's the drain cutoff, so when the water level comes below right here on this side, it'll stop draining. Just to kind of simulate that, we'll simulate a quick power outage by unplugging, so you can see our return stopped, and now this will continue draining and kind of fill up our sump reservoir just until the water level gets low enough below that point. It's a little noisy right now, just because I haven't put the cap on. There's going to be an adjustable air valve on there. That way we'll be able to kind of control the amount of air that goes through, and that baffles the noise a little bit. So now that the water level is getting close, you can hear it kind of slow down. And you can see through here that it's just down to a trickle for the water flow. That's just the last little bit of it coming out. But that's the nice thing about going up to a 20-gallon sump as well, as we have plenty of room. You know, right here's the water level and here's the top of the tank. So there's plenty of room for that to catch up. And now you can hear that this is done draining. To start this back up, you know, power comes back on. Oops, I plugged it back in. So here comes our return water. This gets kind of bubbly down here because we have this ball valve, like I said earlier, will control the rate of flow that either returns or goes up. So if I have it balanced out right now where the water line in this last chamber above the pump will pretty much stay at a constant rate. Once, you know, and that equilibrium is just to match what's draining with what's being returned versus where the top water is coming out. Here's the emergency overflow. I'm going to get that set up here in a few minutes and we'll start testing that one out. The idea with this one is if I put my hand over this, that will slow the siphon down considerably, or I can unscrew this plug and just break the siphon. You know, if something were to clog the entire drain, then the water level will raise up to a point where it overfills into this, and then the same mechanics for getting it back down into the actual sump, just to keep the water moving. So now you can see that this is actually set up. Get the light on this time, so you can see that this is just above the water line there. So any water, I have this all primed now, so any water that comes up and over is going to drain out through this tube and wind up in that same place in the sump, and that's that back one right there. And you can actually kind of see the water, some of the extra water just trickling down. So let's simulate my main drain being clogged by forcing this return almost all the way open. So now you can see that the water is coming out much faster, and as the water level rises in this, that's starting to drain down, keeping the water level at the same height. The more it gets submerged, the quicker it drains. You can kind of see the water flowing down through here. The idea of this second one is that it's going to, you know, keep up in the case that this first one gets partially clogged, or something crazy happens with extra water in here. And you can see it's just barely keeping up. I'm running both of these drains. And then this one is still draining at full speed here. Then to simulate another power failure, you know, same principles apply. We'll go ahead and unplug the pump. You can see everything will finish draining off here. You know, and the differences between these two drains, these two siphon overflows, the way they're built, is this one, whenever the water level reaches here at the bottom of this, it stops draining. And this one, whenever the water level reaches below this one, the opening, the water will stop draining. The water will still stay primed around the back here in all this tubing, just waiting for, you know, the water to come back in and start the siphon again. So now you can see that the water is just finishing draining up. You can see that the water level here on the pump side is slowly rising. You know, this should be pretty safe, I think, in case of a power outage. And this time you'll see that we got no leaks down here, except for that, but I think that was from me playing with the siphon overflow, or the priming the second siphon overflow. So we finally have the tank in the new stand. Had my neighbor Tyler come give me a hand moving this. We drained about 2/3 of the water out into these buckets, and now we're just siphoning it down into the pump, and it's doing its thing to fill it back up. Here's just a quick update. I'm building the hood, which is actually going to be in two separate parts. This one is the back of it, and it's resting. This one will rest directly on the back of the tank on these rails on the bottom, and then that second rail is where the light unit is going to sit. You can see it's just hanging from the ceiling right now, but it's going to be mounted inside here. I'm kind of concerned about heat, so I may end up drilling or cutting a hole in the top and putting a small computer fan in just to keep some air circulating. Here's the front of it. This one's a little smaller because I made enough room. I don't know if you can see it. I made enough room on the back of this to for all the plumbing and stuff to hang down over the back of this. These two will be connected by this continuous hinge, so when you need to access it or whatever, just flip the whole thing up on top of itself. Alright, so today was a very good day. We got the entire sump set up, the hood is installed. Let me just show in here. I have the heater right across the front there, the UV sterilizer in back. All the filter media is stacked up. Everything's been running great so far. So let's you can see I still need to work on my inline CO2 injector to get the infuser or the diffuser out of the actual tank. But you can see it's a lot clearer now with all the hardware just kind of painted black and in the background. So like we had earlier, here's our main siphon drain. Here's my return line. I just wanted to break up as much flow as possible. That way it's not causing any too much agitation. I also didn't want it. Oop, plants are floating away. I also didn't want it under the water line, so I wouldn't get a reverse siphon in case of a power outage. And here's the second drain. You can see the water line is just at the top, and have my check valves kind of pointed down there. I was thinking about installing an aqualifter system to keep these things primed, but it looks like we're doing good so far, so I don't see a reason to. I got my lighting set up on these two rails under here, so I can slide this out if I need to get back there. And then there's the blue moonlight LED lighting, which can't really see it in the video, but it's got a nice blue glow to the whole tank. And then here's the top of the hood on the top of this. So here's the front. It just kind of hinges down. I got to trim down some of these side rails because it's just barely stopping at some point. Just come back and do a little sanding on it later. And there's the first stop, and there's the second stop. So close that all the way, and then this is what the closed hood looks like. Focus, there we go. So this is going to be the whole setup, and I'll be getting the doors done here soon within the next couple days when I have some time.